Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Making More from Sheep webinar series, an AWI and MLA funded initiative. My name is David Brown and I work with the New South Wales State Coordinators HameSackett. I'm going to be your webinar host tonight. Our next webinar is going to be held on Wednesday the 19th of April. That's next Wednesday. And in that webinar we're going to focus on the latest wool industry financial and production benchmarks and what some of the best wool producers in the industry, or the most profitable wool producers in the industry, are doing that may be a little bit different to the rest. Before we get started, just want to give a brief rundown of the webinar platform for those who have not attended a webinar with us before. This control panel that you see here is going to be up in the right hand corner of your screen. We can't hear you, but you can hear us. Now, that red toggle button there will collapse or reinstate that panel if it's in the road of the presentation. That question box is imperative. That's where you're going to be logging in your questions for our presenter this evening. If anyone wants to put a few questions or comments in that box now, that number one lets us know that you know where it is, and it also gives us confidence that I can hear you. Okay. Great, a few people coming through there. Hi from the west, thank you Brad. Fine and sunny in Bendigo, sounds good. There's been a good break in a lot of areas, so we're looking, and I hope those few areas that may have missed the break, in southeast Australia at least, get some rain soon. Just introducing the Making More from Sheep program. Tonight's webinar is going to be focusing on genetics, module 9. So if you go on Google and type in Making More from Sheep or MMFS, you should get the Making More from Sheep homepage. It's full of good resources and information, helpful tips and tools for producers in the sheep industry. It's not restricted to merinos, it's merinos and prime lamb producers will find information here. Tonight's webinar is going to be presented by Lu Hogan. Now, Lu is the coordinator of industry training engagement at the Sheep CRC, and she has been responsible for training programs in genetics, fly strike management, and electronic identification in sheep. More recently, Lu has been involved in the development of digital applications for the sheep industry, such as RamSelect and Ask Bill. Previously, Lu has had roles of AWI, the Victorian DPI, and the CSIRO. Currently, Lu is also a prime lamb producer and a beef producer in New England, so not only theoretical skills but also practical application. So with that, I'm going to introduce Lu to the webinar. Just give me 1 second while I organise that. Good evening, Lu, how are you?
Very well, thanks, David.
Good to hear. Now, Lu, I'm just switching screens there for you, and we're looking forward to tonight's presentation, and I'll leave you to it.
Thank you very much, and thanks very much everyone for coming on tonight and just before Easter. I know everyone will be busy. So tonight I just wanted to talk to you about the importance of buying the right rams for your business. We all know they're a bit of a pain to look after on the farm because they tend to get in the way. They're a little mob that need a little paddock. They can get fly blown, they can get out and in with the ewes at the wrong time, so they can be a bit of a pain, but of course they actually deliver those lambs to us that turn into meat and wool that we make money from. But the other reason why rams are so important to us is that they really do drive genetic gain within the flock. Can you see my screen, David?
Just waiting for it there. Yeah, we can see it now. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, yeah, so they really do drive genetic gain within the flock, and that's because of the amount of selection intensity we can apply when we go to buy our rams. So we know that half the genes of any progeny come from mum and half come from dad, but the selection intensity we apply when we go to buy those rams is what can really drive improvement in whatever the traits we're interested in, whether it's fleece weight or carcass weight, etc. On the ewe side, in a self-replacing flock, we're really limited to culling, perhaps the bottom 20 or 30%, depending on our reproduction rate, because we need to maintain the flock size, and so therefore we can't apply as much selection intensity to the ewe side. So that's why rams are so important, and buying the right ones is absolutely fundamental to having a successful business. In the past, when we were very focused on wool production, we had a lot of very skilled, and we still do have a lot of very skilled sheep classes and people who can visually assess sheep, particularly for the wool traits, so fleece weight and fibre diameter, and they made good gains in terms of selecting animals that were very good performers in those areas. And the reason that they were successful is that both those traits, fleece weight and fibre diameter, you can assess pretty well visually, and they use their skills to do that. And the other thing is that both those traits are fairly highly heritable, so what you see in the animal, a fair proportion of that is passed on to its progeny. So we really did make some pretty good gains in the past when we were really just focused on fleece weight and fibre diameter with our visual skills, or even some raw measurements on fleece weight and fibre diameter. But as you know, we've moved into a fairly new era in the sheep industry where we get, some in the order of half our income from meat and half our income from wool, and in some cases more from meat. And so we're interested in a whole lot of additional traits now, not only live weight and wool production, but also the reproductive performance of animals, their resistance to diseases like worms and flies, and increasingly we're interested in eating quality traits to ensure that we provide a high quality lamb product to our customers. Now, of course, a lot of these traits we can't see, so we can't assess them visually. And we've also learned in recent times that we do need to account for the environment that a ram's been raised in to be able to know its genetic potential. So when we go to buy rams without any genetic information, we can only assess them on how they stand in front of us. And the things that we don't know when we do that are, were they born a twin or a single? Was their mother a maiden? Have they had different management or different feed, or have they been sick during the early stages of their life? And all those things could affect how the ram stands in front of you at the ram sale. So all in all, we need to have some better tools for this industry that is interested in lots more traits now, and many of them not very easy to assess visually. So Australian sheep breeding values are that new tool, and I really want to spend some time now just explaining to you what ASBVs are and how you can use them to make better selections for rams. So firstly, moving to what is a breeding value, and then I'll explain indexes after that. So a breeding value is something that's provided by your ram breeder, generally prior to the sale in the sale catalogue, and certainly available on the Sheep Genetics website and on the RamSelect website, which I'll show you shortly. An Australian sheep breeding value gives us it takes the raw performance for that sheep, for that ram, for the traits that we're interested in our breeding objective, and adjusts it for the environment and management effects that I just mentioned before, how much feed the animals had, whether it was born a twin or a single, makes adjustments for all those things that can affect the performance of the animal. And the result of that is, after lots of calculations and clever mathematics, is an Australian sheep breeding value. And an ASBV allows us to predict how a ram's progeny will perform, so it's an estimate of what the lambs that animal size will do in the business. And because we have linkage, and I'll explain a little bit more about linkage shortly, between studs and environments, we can compare ASBVs across years and across studs and across environments. So if a ram is +10 for a particular trait in the New England, it will be the same genetically as a ram that's +10 for that same trait in Western Australia, South Australia, Queensland, wherever. So that's what linkage allows us to do, to benchmark right across Australia in different environments. So just to give you a little bit more information about how an ASBV is calculated, you can see this lamb here that we're interested in. Let's just assume it's a ram lamb born in a stud, and from the time it's born we already know its sire, and its dam will be recorded, and we'll start to take measurements on that animal, perhaps birth weight, certainly weaning weight, post-weaning weight, yearling weight, etc. Some fleece information when at its first shearing, and so it goes on right through its lifetime until it either is sold as a commercial ram or leaves the stud. We'll also be taking measurements on its half-brothers and sisters because all that information is useful in the analysis. Similarly, performance information about its sire and its dam can be added into the calculations, so we can use all its relatives information to calculate the ASBV. The analysis also takes into account correlated traits, and by that we mean if we were to select for, as we well know, if you select for fleece weight on its own and take no account of fibre diameter, you'll tend to see an increase in fibre diameter as your fleece weight goes up. So that's what we mean by a correlated trait. If you select for one thing, other things tend to move in a particular direction in unison with that trait. So all that's taken into account. We can also now read the DNA of sheep using a genomics test, and that information is also put into the analysis along with information that the breeder provides about the management group that the animal's been run in and the environment that it's been run in and how it's been raised. And finally, we take account of how heritable the particular traits are that we're interested in, and that all goes into a big supercomputer and calculates breeding values for that particular animal on the left-hand side, and also for all his brothers and sisters as well. So that's the basis of the calculations. There's some very clever people that do that work at UNE through the Animal Genetics and Breeding Unit and at Sheep Genetics. And it's way beyond me, but I certainly know the value of the information that they produce. I just want to talk a little bit more now about linkage and how ASBVs work and how important the linkage component is. Let's just assume we had three properties here, A, B and C, and we were interested in how the progeny, the live weight of the progeny born on those three properties. Now, if there were three ram teams on those properties, one was green, let's call them individual rams. So there's a green ram, a blue ram and a red ram, and they're all on different properties. We really have no way of comparing the performance of those rams because the progeny are going to be raised in different environments with different amounts of feed, different management, etc. So we really can't compare the performance of those progeny. But if we share the semen of a common ram across the three properties, so the pink ram, we now have a way to actually compare and link the information from the three properties. So for example, the progeny of the green ram on property A on average were 1 kilo better than the pink ram. On property B, the progeny of the blue ram were actually 3 kilograms poorer on average than the pink ram. And on property C, you can see the red ram's progeny were 5 kilos better than the pink ram. So now we've got a way to actually, if we use that pink ram as a benchmark, to link the information about the three other rams because we know the relative performance of their progeny against that pink ram. And that's the basis of linkage and how ASBVs allow us to benchmark across lots of environments, different studs, different years, etc. That's a very important concept to give you confidence in Australian sheep breeding values. Moving on now, I just want to highlight to you some of the main traits that are reported in the analysis at Sheep Genetics, whether it's for merinos or terminals or maternals or doonies. So fleece weight, fibre diameter, staple strength, staple length, immunity to worms are all there, as well as some carcass traits, live weight, fat depth, eye muscle depth and reproduction number of lambs weaned. Now, there are many more traits, but they're probably some of the main ones that you'll be interested in as ram buyers. And it's really good if you can get familiar with those abbreviations that are used for those traits because you'll see them in catalogues and on pen cards, etc. at sales. The other important thing to know is that we have age stages at which traits are reported. So you can see those at the bottom there. There's B for birth, P for post-weaning weight, etc. So when you see an ASBV for a particular trait, it will have an age stage in front of it. So if you put those two things together, you can see WWT stands for weaning weight, so a weight at the weaning age, and YCFW is clean fleece weight at the yearling age. So yeah, just get familiar with that terminology and be confident to use that and read catalogues with those traits. Now, Australian sheep breeding values are a little bit tricky in the sense that they're based on zero. They're based around deviations from zero. So the average of animals in the database in 1990 was set at 0, and performance is described as deviations from that 0 point from there on in. So as you can imagine, since 1990 there's been quite a bit of change in terms of where the industry has gone. So we've seen improvements in weight and eye muscle depth through clean fleece weight. So ASBVs for those traits have increased from 0, so they're positive and are greater than 0 now in general. And some traits have actually declined because we want them to decline. So things like fibre diameter and worm egg count have gone down, because that's actually a good thing for our breeding objective, to have finer wool and more resistance to worms. And there are traits that are still around the 0 value on average, such as number of lambs weaned and fat. And it's just that we haven't made quite as much change in those traits, or we've decided that, or as an industry, people have tended to want to maintain them around that 0 value. So yeah, they're not absolute values, they're deviations from 0, and that's another very important concept to remember when you're looking at ASBVs. So if we pull it all together now, this is typical of what a pen card you might see hanging above a ram at a ram sale. So this is a Merino Select ASBV for a Merino ram, obviously. His tag number is up the top there. He was born in 2014 and he has a 4-digit ID following the 14. Now we can see that we've got ASBVs for this ram for yearling clean fleece weight, fibre diameter, weight, worm egg count, staple strength, and EBWR stands for breech wrinkle. So if we're looking for planer animals for fly strike resistance, then you need to be looking for the breech wrinkle ASBV. So we can see that this ram is 18.1 for yearling clean fleece weight, which is expressed in terms of percentages. So he's a long way above the average of the database back in 1990, and he's also a long way above his average for his flock, which is at 1%. So he's, really a superior performer in that flock. In terms of fibre diameter, he's become finer. He's minus 2.4, and that's about average for the flock that he's in. And for yearling weight, he's plus 3.8, which is once again quite a long way above average for that flock, which is minus 0.2. His worm egg count is minus 9%, which means his resistance to worms is greater than animals were back in 1990, and it's certainly, but he's not quite as good as the average of the flock that he lives in. So yeah, you can see these values, it's really important to get a sense of where these values sit, and we'll talk about the percentile band table in a moment. The other figures that are also on that page are the fibre production index, the merino production index, and the dual purpose index, and I'll talk a little bit more about those in a moment. The other final thing I wanted to just point out to you on this slide is the accuracy figure, which sits under the ASBV value. And you can see in terms of fleece weight, he has an accuracy of 72%. So as commercial ram buyers, if you see an accuracy figure there, you can be confident that the calculations have met the accuracy threshold for the analysis, and it's being reported as an ASBV. You will never see very high accuracies in terms of 100% for young rams, because you only get up to really high levels of accuracy when you've got a lot of progeny on the ground and you're buying young rams that haven't got any progeny that have been measured. But you can be absolutely confident that the figures are accurate and adequate for you to use to buy rams. If they're not, then you won't see an accuracy figure, and it will just be a within flock breeding value rather than Australian sheep breeding value. I'll just move on now to talking about what an index is, and basically it combines the ASBV values for several traits into one single numeric value, and they're available to suit a range of different breeding objectives and breeding programs, and they really are helpful as a quick selection guide to narrow down the rams that you'd like to focus on for a potential purpose. But it is very important to still go and look at the individual ASBVs as well as the index values when you're selecting rams. So in the merino industry, we have 3 commonly used breeding indexes, which describe the 3 sort of typical breeding objectives, if you like, or enterprises. The first one is the dual purpose index, and really this is an index that's useful for people who are perhaps turning off their wether lambs as prime lambs, before they cut their teeth, and also joining a proportion of their ewes to a terminal sire for a prime lamb as well. So as you can see, the drivers of profit in that sort of a business are the number of lambs weaned, about 45% of the contribution to the returns from that index, and also fleece weight's also important, and weight and eye muscle depth, but not a lot of focus on fibre diameter or staple strength in that index, and that probably they would just be maintained or maintained within that index, but your fleece weight would probably be moving upwards, and certainly your number of lambs weaned should be moving upwards if you were selecting rams based on that index. The second index I'd like to talk about is called the Merino Production Plus Index, and this is typical of a wool production enterprise where the wethers would be turned off as yearlings and all the ewes retained in a self-replacing system. So obviously fleece weight and fibre diameter are major profit drivers in that system. Body weight also important because of the wethers being turned off, and reproduction rate is important because you want to have as many animals to sell as possible. So that's slightly different to the dual production in terms of the emphasis and the profit drivers in the business. And the final index that I'd like to tell you about is the Fibre Production Index, and this is really for enterprises that are very, very focused on wool production and not so much on the meat side of the business. And most of the profit in those businesses is driven by fibre diameter, nearly half the contribution to the economic gain, and fleece weight and staple strength. And you can see a little bit of emphasis on number of lambs weaned and one egg count. So depending on the production system you're running, one of these indexes might be a suitable drafting tool for shortlisting rams to inspect when you go to the sale. I'd like to move on now to talking about what a percentile band report is, and it allows you to compare a current drop of animals, and it describes the animal's performance compared to others in the drop, and it also shows you the range of values that are currently exist in the Australian flock, and they're available for all the major traits and indexes. So don't be frightened by this. This is a percentile band table report. You can download this from the Sheep Genetics website. A lot of numbers, but I'll show you how to use it. So you can see all the major traits across the top and the index values. And on the left-hand side, going down, it says band, which stands for percentile band from 0 to 100. So just looking at the first column there for yearling fibre diameter, you can see that this is for animals born in 2015, and in the Merino Select analysis, that the range that exists within industry is from -5.8 to +5.5. So there's a 10 micron range across the merino industry for rams born in 2015, and that's what we'd expect when you think that we go from superfines in Victoria or the New England to large South Australian type merinos. So there's a lot of range available there, and similarly in fleece weight you can see we go from +40% to -36% compared to the 50th percentile, which is where the industry average sits at the moment. So industry average for yearling fibre diameter is -1.2, and industry average 50 percentile for fleece weight is 11.3. So there's no good or bad in this table. It's just, it depends on the production system that you have in your on your property and what you're aiming to do. So if you're a superfine wool producer, you're going to want to be at the up around the upper end of the yearling fibre diameter trait, but you will definitely not be up the top of the clean fleece weight percentile band table. You'd be more towards the lower end of it. So you don't feel that it's good and bad. It's really what you want to achieve and where you're going with your enterprise. So just showing you now how to use this table. If you were considering purchasing a ram that was +15.3 for yearling clean fleece weight, would that be good or bad? And the way to use this table is to check that you've got a current one. So check the current date, and if it's not within the last few months, then download another one from the Sheep Genetics database. Look for the trait of interest, which is yearling clean fleece weight, and then just scroll from the bottom up until you get to the value of 15.3 or closest to it, and project across to the band table, and you can see that a ram at 15.3 would be in the top 30% of the database, so a very good ram for fleece weight. Remembering that animals that sit right at the high levels, say band 10 and above, are likely to be retained within studs as sires, and so probably not going to be available for commercial ram purchase. So I hope, I hope that's clear how to use the table. It's certainly a very useful thing for benchmarking where rams sit relative to the rest of industry. Just want to cover now how you can compare the value of rams and what they might return to your business. So it's a relative value that we're talking about, but let's just say you had the opportunity to buy a ram that was plus 15% for clean fleece weight, and in the past you'd been buying rams that were plus 5%. So you've got on offer a ram that's 10% better than your previous purchases, and you want to know, well, how much more money am I going to make out of that ram compared to what I've had in the past? So let's make an assumption that you're cutting 4 kilograms of clean wool on your property. The progeny that you will get from that ram would get half the genes from the ram and half from its mother. So the wool cut increase would be 5% from that ram. So you get 5%, you could expect an increase in wool cut of 5% from using that ram that was 10% better than the current team. If you're cutting 4 kilos and 5% improvement, that's another 200 grams of extra clean wool per progeny per year. And the animal's equal in all other traits, visual and measured, to your current ram team. Let's try and place a value on that now. So let's assume that you join your rams at 2%, which means you're putting 50 ewes out with each ram, that you're weaning 80%, and that you're using that ram for 3 years. So he'll deliver you 120 lambs in his lifetime. 60 of those will be wethers, 60 of them will be ewes. The wethers shorn once, the ewes shorn 5 times because they're retained on the property. So you've got 360 fleeces from that ram's progeny. We already know that they're going to cut next to 200 grams at 1,000 cents a kilo is $2 extra income per fleece. If we multiply that by the 360 fleeces, you can see that that ram is going to make you an additional $720 over its lifetime. And that might not sound like a huge amount of money, but it comes for free relative to the rams you've already got, assuming you pay the same price for them. And if you multiply that by a team of rams, then it's a lot. It can be a lot of extra money. We could go do a similar example for comparing animals for growth. So you might do this for a team of terminal rams, for example. So let's assume you had the opportunity to buy ram A or ram B, and ram A is 8 kilograms better in post-weaning weight than ram B. So the progeny of ram A will be 4 kilos heavier on average than the progeny of ram B. If we place a value on that, once again, just assume that you join that ram at 2%, so they have 50 ewes, you wean 80% of lambs, you use the ram for 3 years, there's 120 lambs, an extra 4 kilos of weight, a dressing percentage of 43% gives you carcass weight of 1.7 kilos. The value of $5 is pretty cheap at the moment, but on average you're going to get an extra $8.50 out of the carcasses from that ram A, which is an extra $1,000 over the lifetime of that ram. So I'd encourage you, there are a couple of tools on the Making More from Sheep website that you can download to do these calculations, and you can do this for yourself with rams that you're considering to buy to understand the relative, the increased amount of income you're going to make from purchasing rams with better ASBVs. Just want to move now to telling you a little bit about RamSelect, which is a website developed by the Sheep CRC that makes it a lot simpler to use ASBVs for your ram purchase. So what RamSelect allows you to do is to define your breeding objective, or the things that are going to make money in your business, and then search for rams that are listed for sale and rank them according to the breeding objective that you've set. And benchmark, you can also benchmark them against industry, and there are additional sections in that website where you can actually enter up your current ram team information and benchmark that team against the industry database as well. And similarly, the CRC are about to launch a new flock profiling test, a genomic test, and that'll allow you to get an average flock ASBV for your ewe base as well. So that's something to look out for in the future. So if you go into the RamSelect website, the first thing you do is select a standard industry index as a starting point, and in this example I'm using one of the terminal indexes, the Lamb 2020 Eating Quality Index. You can see it at the top left-hand side there. You select that as your starting point, and then you use these slider bars to adjust the emphasis on the different profit drivers according to what you need for your business. So there are primary slider bars for growth, carcass, weaning percentage, parasite resistance and eating quality. And then if you open up these secondary sections where it says show, you can actually adjust the balance between different components of growth, for example, weaning weight and post-weaning weight, or in the eating quality slider it might be intramuscular fat and shear force. So there are similar things set up for merinos as well, and obviously that the merino sliders have fleece traits as well. So once you're happy with the way you've positioned your slider bars, you've got a pie chart there that summarises your breeding objective, and you can save that on the app and have that there for using in subsequent years and come back to it at any time. What the app returns to you is a list of rams ranked for your breeding objective. So you can see here there's a terminal rams from Farah, and you can see there's a rank number on the left hand side, 1 to 8, their lot number in the auction listed next to that, the animal's ID, the stud, etc. You could be searching across multiple studs at one time. You don't just have to search a single stud. There are, as I said, there are a range of benchmarking facilities within the app that allow you to benchmark rams available for sale, the rams you've got at home, and also in the future your U-base once we've got genomic profiling commercially available. So this graphic at the top here shows you, it's actually the percentile band table just displayed graphically. So the yellow box shows you the top and bottom values for post-weaning weight in industry. The red line is current industry average. The purple line is the team average for the top 20 in your ranked list of sale rams, and the turquoise box shows you the range of values within that top 20. So there's that graphic is available for a whole range of facilities through the website, and once you've entered your ram team and indicated which years you're using your rams for, you can track changes in ASBV values over time for your ram team, and that's really important to know whether you are actually making improvement over time in the rams that you're buying and therefore the performance of your flock. So in summary, the ramselect.com.au website allows you to define a breeding objective and save it and have it in a place for permanent record, store your ram team information and benchmark them, collect your genomic flock profiling information when that's available, and all of that information is really important for helping you buy the next lot of rams because you know what you've already got at home, and if you say, look, I've got an average of +8 at home for fleece weight, I really do want to make improvement, you know you've got to go out and buy rams that are better than +8 in the future, or whatever the trait might be. So a really important tool, and I just really encourage you to go and have a look at the website. There are a range of training videos on the Learn More tab on the homepage. Just get comfortable with using it. There's not a lot of rams on there at the moment because it's not sale time, but come rams selling season there'll be lots of rams listed there. And the Sheep CRC also has this book, Australian Sheep Breeding Values, which is a little booklet that explains most of the things I've been talking about tonight. So if you'd like a copy of that, please write down my contact details there and I can post out a copy to you. So David, I might stop there for questions, if that's okay.
That's great, Lou. Thank you very much for a very informative and well-rounded presentation.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Lou, I'm just going to give you a break for a few moments there.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks everyone for being part of that presentation. Now, just quickly, don't forget that at the end of this webinar there's going to be a survey pop up. It pops up at the end of every survey, at the end of every webinar, so you're able to provide Lucinda Hogan and myself and the Making More from Sheep team with some feedback on the content, the quality and relevance of the content this evening, and whether there's any sort of changes that you'd like to see in the delivery of the webinars, or you could say MLA or AWI funding in general, because that there's a conduit for you back to these organisations. We take the feedback seriously and we make sure it gets back to the organisations in a very in a format that they can, that's easily compiled and understood. So Lou's kindly offered to stay online for as long as we need tonight to answer any questions that you, the audience, may have. Now, there's already a few questions coming through here, Lou, so you've sparked a bit of interest in our audience. And if anyone has is a bit shy or not sure about asking the questions, don't be afraid. They're anonymous, and it's a good chance you don't always get experts in these specific areas like Lou is in the sheep genetics field at your disposal. So I encourage you to make the best of it and keep sending those questions in. So Lou, we've got a few questions lining up here. If you're ready to go, we might jump into them, okay?
Yes, that's fine.
So Lou, a question here from Paul. He asks, is it important to purchase rams from your local area? What problems could arise from buying, say, from hay for the New England?
Yeah, so as I indicated before, a value of +10 is 10 right across Australia. So that tells you the genetic potential of the animal. But of course you do get variation in expression of genes in different environments. So we would generally say to be cautious, for example, bringing a sheep from out west into the New England, because it's just such a wetter environment with a lot of summer rainfall that an animal from the west won't probably have been selected for resistance to fleece rot, for example. And so therefore you might really run into problems with fly strike. But that said, people do it and trial animals from different environments, and certainly in general, in terms of weight traits, fleece weight traits, you should be able to transfer animals from different environments. But you do need to be careful of worm resistance and fleece rot and things like that, because expression can change when the environment's radically different, even though the genetic potential is the same.
Thanks, Lou. A question here from Philip. When talking about weaning weights, are you comparing all progeny when potentially there could be 6 weeks or more difference in their birth dates, assuming that they're all weaned on the same day?
Yes, so the analysis takes account of that and makes adjustments for differences in weaning weight, in birth date and weaning weight. So particularly most terminal or maternal breeders actually record information on the day of birth of the animal, so they have the actual date of birth and they have a birth weight, so they can adjust for the actual date of birth of the animal. In the merinos, that's not always as easy because there's not always birth traits collected, but they do make adjustments, and particularly if there's been long lambing periods, they do make adjustments for date of birth and 6-week differences and things like that.
Great, thanks, Lou. Lou, a question here from Joe. Joe asks, have the percentages comprising each of the 3 indexes changed over time to take account of changes in the relativity of prices for meat and wool, including changes in fibre diameter premiums?
Yes, so the indexes are reviewed, I think it's every 3 years, and certainly prices are updated, and changes in industry emphasis between different traits is taken into account. So they try to keep the indexes as relevant to what's happening in industry as they can, but they can't be changing them every year. But certainly, yeah, I think it's roughly every 3 years they're reviewed, 3 to 5 years.
Great, thanks, Lou. Lou, you've impressed someone tonight. Hi, Lou, excellent presentation. ASBVs may be lacking in a few selection traits. For example, cow energy value for Angus cattle has crashed over the last 40 years using similar thinking, i.e. EBVs, US Angus figures. This means dollar value has been transferred from farmers to feedlotters. Are we missing the same in sheep? Happy to discuss later. That's from Graham.
Okay, sorry, I'm probably not adequately qualified on the beef side to comment much on that one. So I might take that offline if that's all right.
No, that's fine. And I didn't do you any favours. I was a bit disjointed in how I interpreted the question, but yeah, there's some, obviously Graham's concerned about the experience of the Angus industry and wondering about the sheep. But anyway, Graham, I encourage you to be in touch with Lu if you want to take that up with her.
So the only comment I would make is that we do have obviously some lambs finished in feedlots, but we don't have the intensity of interest in feedlot finishing that we have in the beef industry, and I think, you know, there probably is there could be some disparities between a breeding objective for a farm product-based production system versus a feedlot system. So, but look, I'm not adequately qualified to comment any further than that.
No, fair enough. Thank you, Jay. Sorry, Luke. What is the process for getting a DNA flock profile? That's from Joe.
Okay, so the CRC will be, we are still just finishing off the development of that test, but in the next probably 3 to 4 months we will make that a commercially available test, and when that happens you'll be able to come into our website, order the test online, and then we will send you out 20 blood cards. And what you do is take a random sample of 20 ewes from your youngest age group and just get a dot of blood onto the blotting paper on the card and send that back to us, and we'll send that away for DNA analysis. It takes about 10 weeks for the results to come back, and what you get is a flock average ASBV, not for every trait, so we can provide them for fleece weight, fibre diameter, weight, and staple length and the indexes at the moment, but we're working hard to try and increase the range of traits that we can report on, and hopefully in the future we'll also be able to do it for crossbred, say for example first cross ewes as well, but we're not there yet. The cost of that test will be $800, so that's 20 cards by a $40 test. But when you think about it, to know genetically where your ewe base is, and probably only need to do that maybe once every 5 years, I think it's quite a good investment to understand genetically where you sit.
Great, thanks Lou. Lou, a question here from Peter. Peter asks, how heritable is the staple strength index? And just to put this in context, Lou, there was a comment earlier in the evening on the text line here, someone hoping to learn a bit more about the heritability of the different traits and how this plays into the ASBVs. But Peter asks, how heritable is the staple strength index, as this is surely relative to nutrition?
Yeah, so for I do actually have a slide on heritability if you wanted me to get that up. You probably just want to blank my screen out while I look for it. But from memory, staple length is what we call moderately heritable, so not as heritable as fibre diameter or fleece weight, but certainly moderately heritable. But all these traits have a genetic component and an environmental component, so those two things come together in the expression of the genetics in your environment. And staple length is no different to any of the other traits in that regard. There, David? Hello?
Oh, sorry, Lou, I was talking and I was muted myself. You're welcome to pull that slide up if you want.
Okay, I'll just see if I can find it quickly.
If you don't want to show your screen, you'll need to just hit stop showing screen on your control panel. Yep, there you go, perfect. Just while Lou's doing that, guys, just a reminder that we are having another webinar next Wednesday night on the 19th of April. It's going to be focusing on wool industry benchmarks, financial and production, and what some of the best producers seem to be doing that may be a little bit different to the average producer. Now that's going to be coming from yours truly. It's going to be a webinar that I'm delivering, and it's going to be drawing on the 15-16 benchmarking data and also some historical benchmarking data to try and tease out just who are the most profitable producers and what they're doing compared to the average of the database. So it should be a good webinar, and I'm looking forward to being able to deliver that to the industry. Okay, Lou, we've got your slide there. Thank you.
Yeah, so I apologise, staple length is actually not on this slide, but you can see that, as I mentioned before, fibre donor and fleece weight are both highly heritable. Strength, lean meat yield, eye muscle depth, fat depth, weight, when they can, are moderately heritable, and birth weight and number of lambs born or weaned are lowly heritable. So in those lowly heritable traits, we know that there's lots of environmental factors and management factors that influence the outcome we get for both those things. But it's with these more lowly heritable traits that are becoming increasingly economically important to the business that ASBVs actually come into their own and give us more value, because they separate out all that environmental stuff, so we understand the genetic potential of the animals. And because a trait has low heritability, it doesn't mean it's not important, and it's still something, if it's important for you to make money, then it still should be in the breeding objective.
Okay, thank you, Lou. Lou, question here from Bruce. Bruce says, comment followed by question, some minor but up-and-coming breeds are not involved in ASBVs, perhaps not the scale, or maybe be afraid of the crossbreed comparisons. How can we assess these rams, and how can we get them on board, e.g. The Australian whites?
Well, unfortunately, you can't benchmark them unless they're in the system. So, I mean, I think the thing is to encourage them to get involved and to participate. And yes, they may feel uncomfortable about the crossbreed analysis, and there does need to be enough crossbreeding going on to give the linkages, as I mentioned before. But yeah, look, it is an issue, but all you can do is encourage those breeds to become part of the system.
Thanks, Lou. Just for my clarification, does that mean that I can rank a white Suffolk ram against a Dorset ram? Is that what you mean by crossbreed comparisons?
Yeah, so all the animals that are in the terminal breed analysis can all be compared. So Poll Dorsets, White Suffolks, Dorpers, Texels, etc. But they can't be compared to the animals that are in the maternal analysis, which is Coopworths, Border Leicesters, composite maternals, etc. They are in a separate analysis, and you can't compare between those two. And obviously you can't compare merinos to either terminals or maternals. So there are those three separate analyses, and the Doonies actually sit in their own separate analyses as well, so you can't compare Doonies to merinos.
Okay, thank you. Clears a few things up. Question here.
Just another thing I might mention, David, is I should have given in the presentation, is that I've focused tonight very much on using the figures to rank rams and select rams, but it's still very important when you get to the sale to assess those rams for their visual conformation traits and the wool quality type traits that we don't have breeding values for. So, I just think it's really important to know which animals are genetically the best before you get there, and then you can focus your visual assessment on the animals that are genetically at the top of your list.
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification, Lou. Lou, a question here from Matt. Now, Matt's in South Australia. Matt asks, how do I link EID in my UFlock to ASBVs?
So if you're not collecting that information in your commercial flock, then you can't. You need to be part of sheep genetics to generate ASBVs in your commercial flock. The EID tag is merely a way of identifying the animal and collecting information against that animal's identification number with the electronic tag. So they're really two different issues.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, thanks for that, Lou. Lou, a question from Glenn here. Rams with good figures may still have some structural faults. Will there be structure assessments?
So that's the point I was just making a moment ago, that you still do need to go and make sure that structurally they're acceptable to you. So they've got good feet, good legs, good teeth, and good, they can eat and walk and mate. So this is giving you, the ASBVs give you information on their genetic potential, but you still need to make sure that they're going to be functional on the property. So there's two components to the selection process.
Yeah, right. Well, thank you. Another question here. from Joe. What percentage of RAM sales now provide ASBVs?
Okay, so the latest figures I've got, and they're a couple of years old now, are that around probably 40% of merino rams have ASBVs generated. Now, whether the breeder uses them in the sale or not, mostly they do now, but certainly up around 40 or perhaps a bit more percent of merinos have ASBVs. In the terminal breeds, around 80% of rams have ASBVs, and in the maternal breeds, around 50%.
Okay, rightio. Well, Lou, I suppose that leads us to, we're actually leading towards the end of the webinar here. There's not many questions coming through anymore, but I've got a question, Lou. Now,
Yes.
I did some analyses on different RAM sales and prices paid for, for the rams versus their different ASBVs and indexes, and I found a pretty stark difference between some of the RAM sales, being that some RAM sales had quite a close correlation between a particular index or a particular ASBV and the price paid for those animals, whereas other sales had quite poor relationships between the objective relative genetic merit of the animals and the price paid for those animals. Now, is that something, a space that you're aware of, whether, how much these objective measures of genetics is influencing buyer decision making?
Yeah, so there's been a number of attempts to do some analysis on that. Some of them show, quite strong correlations within a stud. And I think one of the things we've found is that for breeders who put a lot of effort into educating their clients about ASBVs and their value, you can find pretty strong relationships between index values and sale prices, or particular traits and sale prices. For other breeders who perhaps haven't had the opportunity to give as much education to their clients, then the value is not quite as well known, so you don't see such clear relationships. I think the other factor to take into account is that, people, particularly in the merino side, you might get, say there's 50 people at the ram sale. They're not necessarily all looking for the same things because they come from different environments. So I started in New England. If there are ram buyers from out west, then worm egg count's not a high priority for them. So they can buy rams that don't necessarily have good worm resistance, and it won't be a problem to them because worms are not an issue in the environment that they're going to. So people go along to ram sales wanting different things, and so it's sometimes hard to find clear relationships between traits and value. And I think, but a really good example of where it does work is up here in the New England with worm egg count. You won't, rams that don't have good resistance to worms generally won't be purchased by people up in this environment. So, unless there are clients there from environments where worms are not so much of an issue, you'll see a drop-off when you get to those rams.
Okay, well, thank you for that. No, that's very interesting. It's something that I'm pretty interested in exploring further, and just see if we can tease out what's influencing the price of rams, I suppose. Now, Lou, there's no other questions online here, so I suppose I'll just give one more reminder about next week's webinar, 8 p.m, same time, same place in your office, and we're going to be dealing with the latest wool industry financial and production benchmarks and what some of the better producers are doing with their to increase the profitability of their wool flocks. Now, there's going to be a survey pop up after this, so please take a moment to contribute there, and I'll be able to provide that survey data or your feedback to Lou and to MLA and AWI. So Lou, I think even though we don't know it, there's a collective applause out there, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of the audience and the program for taking the time out on your Wednesday evening to deliver to us.
Oh, my pleasure, and as I said, happy for people to call me or email me if they want some further information or more help.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much for that, And with that, I thank the audience for supporting the Making More from Sheep webinar series, and hope to see you over the coming weeks at future webinars. Everyone have a good evening.